Truth Frequency Radio Network. K-TFRN. Worldwide.
Hola, this is Sienna inviting you to join me tonight as we navigate through the seen and the unseen, explore external and internal realities, expose on-world and off-world agendas, discover a path to joy and freedom. Now, join me as we illuminate the Shadowland and reclaim our birthright as free and sovereign beings.
Welcome and congratulations for finding your way here, where we illuminate the Shadowland, shining a light on the artificial construct. This is your host, Sienna, and please always remember, do your own research and use your own discernment, never forgetting that your growing awareness is building the truth frequency. Tonight, I am privileged and honored to have Karen Hudes. I hope I'm saying that right.
I answer to everything, Sienna. Leah.
Okay, bless your heart. She has studied at Yale Law School. She has an extensive background in the World Bank, and she is an incredible gift to us all because she is a whistleblower that have come right out of the World Bank. She's gone viral with some of her videos, even though a lot of them been tried to take them down as quickly as she puts them up. And she has an enormous amount of wisdom and insight about what is going on in the global financial and elite maneuvers worldwide. Good evening, Karen. It's wonderful having you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Sienna Leah.
Now, I know that you have done several interviews that have dived into this history of how you did blow the whistle on various aspects of the power and the corruption, the lies and the deception in the World Bank, and you paid a price for that as well. And I am, in the hour that we have, very interested in diving into an update, but I think we need to give people some kind of a leverage into your information and how you got involved in this journey as a whistleblower in the World Bank. And that's way too broad of a question. So yeah.
No, I can give people a broad introduction, and then we can get right to the update. But I am an insider. I studied development economics at the University of Amsterdam, so I knew that I wanted to work at the World Bank, which is the premier institution. And unfortunately, I didn't understand who had set up the World Bank or why. But one of the things that I did know before I went to the World Bank was I knew that it had taken a nosedive when Robert McNamara joined the World Bank. I knew this because the man who had been there when the World Bank Treaty was negotiated in 1944 at Bretton Woods, the World Bank and the IMF are twin organizations that were established by 44 countries at the end of World War II. Anyway, so he was a young lawyer, and he became the longest-serving general counsel, and I got to know him. He was in his 80s when I got to know him. I played the cello, he played the piano, and he would regale me with the operation manual of the World Bank. And so I went in there with my eyes half open. I knew that Robert McNamara had made the place dishonest, but I didn't know how dishonest, and I didn't know who was dishonest, and I thought the dishonesty was confined to the World Bank. I didn't realize that the World Bank was at the very hub of an intricate cover-up to begin with. So that was what happened, and I'm trained as a lawyer, and I know securities law, and that means that if you've got a financial statement and there are bonds, and the World Bank issues $180 billion worth of bonds on the capital market. The reason it needs to do that is because it takes the money from the sale of its bonds, and it earns income with that. investments. It's doing the derivative trading, and their traders are doing a good job. That's what pays the World Bank salaries. But you have to go back to the parliaments and Congress every now and then for what's called a capital increase. And so when the World Bank went back for its capital increase in 2010, by that time I had been whistleblowing along with other people who saw that the World Bank was fraudulent. Its financial statements were fraudulent. For example, it was overcharging borrowers on the interest rates. Does that sound familiar? So anyway, as a lawyer, my job is to end that situation where the financial statements are incorrect. And I went to the U.S. Treasury Department. And when I went to the Treasury Department in 2006, what I was telling them was not only that there was a cover-up of corruption, because I had seen corruption up close in the Philippines of all places. And that turns out was just a lucky assignment, because the Philippines is where all this gold is buried. Now, I can say it was a lucky assignment, but actually the person who put me there and the person who brought me into the World Bank was an Egyptian lawyer who had been the general counsel for the OPEC, which is pricing the petroleum. So I think he had he assigned me to Jordan and Yemen for 10 years before he moved me to the Philippines. I was in the Philippines all of 4 years when I started reporting corruption in the Philippines. And that was big corruption. The man who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the Philippines ended up impeaching Estrada, who was he was ripping off the place. And there was a bank that ended up with people pulling out their deposits, had to be bailed out for $500 million. And that was because a crony of the crony's name was Lucio Tan. And what Lucio Tan had done was he had owned Philippine Airlines, which was in default on its loans from the second largest bank in the Philippines, Philippine National Bank. And so he shouldn't buy employee shares and take over the bank, but that's exactly what he did. And so I told the man who was in charge of the lending program in the Philippines that he had to warn the government that we would not be able to disperse the loan because of the corruption. And instead, he had me reassigned. So what I did was I went to see Jim Wolfenson, who was then the president of the World Bank, together with the man who was representing the Dutch government. And what Jim Wolfenson did was he started retaliating, which I didn't like. So when I went to the Treasury Department, I went there with information about corruption in the Philippines. I went there with information. What I told Senator Lugar was the German executive director said that the board was being treated like mushrooms, put in the dark and covered with fertilizer. And but the most important thing that I told the Treasury Department and the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations was I told them about a very fancy game theory model using political science. Jacek Kugler, who was the president of the War Peace Association. I'm sure I'm mangling the name, but political scientists that do game theory modeling get together and compare notes. And he was the president of that organization. And so he came to the World Bank with a very accurate stakeholder analysis, which said, he warned me in 2004. He said, if we don't turn things around, Karen, there's going to be a nuclear war in the Middle East. So you better believe that I was not going to drop this problem when it didn't turn around. I felt that that I was privileged to know this information. And I've been working together with the other stakeholders in the World Bank, that is all of the 188 countries that own the World Bank. It's a co-op. And one of the questions, Sienna Lee, that I get asked all the time is, what about Perkins? Why don't you just ditch the World Bank? It's such a mess and it's not going to do any good. And the point about it is it has brought in all of these countries. It's a place where you can try to prevent a nuclear war. There aren't that many places in the world where you can do that. And the thing about the World Bank is there are all these countries that have signed treaties to belong to the World Bank. And what I'm learning about law, I mean, people love to hate law and lawyers, but just think about it. It's a way to convene the parties. If you have something, a message you want to give, using the law, a very good way to do that. And so, yes.
Karen, it is a held notion among a lot of alternative sites and news sites that the level of corruption in the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and the Federal Reserve is at such a high level, and it is very, very hard for any of us to believe that these people will be persuaded not to continue with their agenda, that they have this unstoppable propensity for domination and enslavement, that they see us as useless eaters, and they do not have our good intentions at heart in any way, shape, or form. They've been manipulating over generations and generations for thousands of years. Now, are you saying that you feel there's some light at the end of this tunnel, that actually working to transform this from the inside, you're seeing some positive developments there?
Yes, what I'm saying is that I'm forming coalitions that hadn't existed before. And when I say I, it's not I. It's the World Bank whistleblowers. There's a team of us, and we're all working together. Some of us are, probably employees of the governments, although I really have no way of knowing that. But I do know that they're very capable of making their points known to their government. Just think about what you have now with the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They have told the United States that they are going to be putting together their own development bank. One of the things that happened when I started testifying to the UK Parliament, I've testified there 3 times. My statements are up on the website of the UK Parliament. And one of the things that I've been saying, and don't forget, it was the UK Parliament that said that the Syria war was not going to go forward as far as they were concerned. This is not a little thing.
They've agreed not to. Yes, that's huge.
Okay, these are things that you haven't seen before, and I can tell you about other things that you haven't seen before. So let's get back to the BRICS. Do. Let's get back to the BRICS. They have said that they're starting their own development bank. What they're planning on doing is they're planning on using, and they account for 25% of international trade. They are not going to be denominating their international trade in dollars. And at the end of a period of time, they're going to, whoever bought more from the other is going to pay in gold. So this is a sea change. And what I was about to say about UK Parliament is that that was the trigger that the man who did this stakeholder analysis was looking for. Once a country was going to look for rule of law, that meant that it was going to be possible to have rule of law govern. And what I have been using is I've been using the securities laws. You have to have disclosure of financial statements. I went out and I bought a World Bank bond, which meant that the World Bank had no immunity. The World Bank waives its immunity to its bondholders. And then I sued KPMG, which is the World Bank's auditors. I had met with the Saudi Arabia chairman of the audit committee and asked him to commission a special audit of internal control over financial reporting, which is why I had a cause of action. He did that. So, I have been writing all of the executive directors many, many times, and I've been writing all of the countries that own the World Bank many, many times, and I've been putting this correspondence out to all the countries. And I shifted just recently, and we want to. I see that we've got 11 minutes left, and I want to in this segment, and I want to talk about gold. But
yes, please.
what I did was I went to the UN now, and I told the countries about a terrible cover-up. I went to Holland because, remember, I speak Dutch. I studied development economics there. And when I was there in 2007, I found out that the executive directors, when they were firing Paul Wolfowitz, because Paul Wolfowitz gave a big pay raise to his girlfriend, and he got fired by the board. And the board was being blackmailed. Some of the executive directors had gone to the same house of ill repute as Eliot Spitzer. Some of the others had just spent their money in ways that made them vulnerable. And they were told what happened in Holland was the man who represented the Dutch government at the time. And he said that other executive directors were being blackmailed. He said he was the man who was in charge of firing Paul Wolfowitz. And Ad Melkert was his predecessor. It was Herman Wijfels who was in charge of leading the deliberations to fire Paul Wolfowitz. Anyway, I went back to the U.S. Congress and I said, are you out of your mind blackmailing other countries' ambassadors? Now let's fast forward where Germany has said that it is not going to share its intelligence with the United States anymore because the United States is misusing its spying information to blackmail its ambassadors. So I took that conversation. I went to the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, and then they told me to go to the Treasury Department, which I did. And I took that conversation that I had with all of the board and with all of the Congress, and I put that in front of the United Nations, all of the countries, a week ago. And I went then to Chuck Hagel, who I had spoken to in Congress in 2008. I said, this kind of shenanigans, blackmailing other countries' ambassadors, is just the thing you don't want to do. And I told him about this stakeholder analysis. And I said, we're going to lose the ability to name the president of the World Bank. And that's exactly what happened in 2010. So when Chuck Hagel got to be the Secretary of Defense, I went to the Inspector General in the Department of Defense, and I said, we are now on track to a currency war. This stakeholder analysis is 90 to 95% accurate. And that weekend, the person in the Department of Defense who was in charge of that stakeholder analysis contacted me on LinkedIn. So I have had a very detailed conversation with 5 different assistant, what are they called? Secretaries of Defense, including the one who is in charge of a special governors council. There are 10 governors on a governors council that was established in 2010 under the Department of Homeland Security. And I have said to the governors, I've said, we are on track for martial law. Every time, somebody incites, does something that looks like they're inciting civil unrest, I go to the governors and I say, it is time to issue, to make gold and silver as legal tender. And the reason I'm doing this is because as I've gotten more and more vocal and the news has gotten out about how I'm really making these executive directors do their work. And how if you go to my website, which is www.kahudes.net, you will see the letters that I've been writing to Congress. And I just went back to the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, and I showed them the previous correspondence. I showed them the accurate stakeholder analysis, which is predicting a nuclear war. I showed them the fact that we are going to lose our confidence in paper currency in short order. We've already gone into a situation called gold backwardation. The foremost expert on gold and economic theories of currency is a Hungarian named Antal Fekete. And he has been helping, describe what happens when people lose their confidence in paper currency. At a certain point, people will not sell gold for any price. And the gold traders and precious metal traders know this very well, because on the 7th of July, that is when it was not possible for the central banks to lease gold anymore. It was too risky. They knew at the end of the term, the person who was leasing the gold may refuse to give it back because we would be in permanent gold backwardation. So what's happening is that all of these ministers of finance are very focused on the fact that they have got to solve problems. You know, the easiest thing when you're a politician is to kick the can down the road. But the ministers of finance know that it is finite. And what happens if people who hold gold are hoarding it because they've lost their confidence in paper currency, is that international trade doesn't go forward, and you have massive, massive, massive unemployment. Because just think about all of the goods that people purchase. They have components from all over the world. They're assembled, because people think that international trade is safe. It's not safe if you have no way to pay for it. So international finance, it's a place where you can't be playing these games. You can't be blackmailing other ministers of finance on the board of the World Bank. It's just too risky for your own sake. And the last thing I wanted to tell your listeners before the break, and we can develop this a little bit, is first of all, how is it, if I've been trying to get people to know about these things since 2007, that you're just now hearing about me? It's because I was very naive and I didn't understand that the mainstream media is owned by the same banks that own the Federal Reserve. And one of the things that I've learned is there's a very accurate study that was done by 3 mathematicians at the Federal Institute of Technology that shows just how the economic system is gamed. The companies that own the Federal Reserve own all the media, and these mathematicians had very accurate information on the 43,000 transnational companies. And what they found out was that there was a secret system of dominance. They called it a super entity. So do you remember when the prices on LIBOR were being agreed to? It's because all of these financial entities are actually one big conglomerate through interlocking corporate directors. That's a fancy way of saying you put the same directors on the boards of all these companies in a kind of a pyramid, so that this super entity is in charge of 40% of the net worth of the 43,000 companies and 60% of their annual earnings. Not that they've invested so much, it's just the clever way that they've cascaded the control. So if that's in place, what does that mean for the stock markets or the price of gold, for example? It's all gamed. Investors that aren't part of that control system are left holding the bag as they manipulate the price of the stock up and down. Right. Yes. But I'll tell you the thing that I just discovered in the last month, I hadn't realized it, that it's not, the problem is not the Fed. It turns out that there's another entity that's even more in control, and that's the Vatican and the Jesuits, who are there as part of the investment team in that super entity. They've infiltrated that. And just think about, the way they exercise control in the rest of the world. And they've been doing that for centuries.
And what about the Zionist element to all this?
They are the bankers, but they are not the ones in the center. They are not the ones that started this. This all started, think about the Magna Carta and I think it was King John or King James. In any event, he ended up having to borrow money from the Vatican, and then he had to keep paying it. So the bottom line is that in the United States, when we pay our money for our IRS taxes, it goes to the UK for a little bit. That happened after the Capitol was burned down in 1812, and then there's an updated treaty. But then most of the money goes to the Vatican. Our taxes are going to the Vatican, and you know how we're paying for our budget? We're paying for it by this shadow system of earnings from drug trade. Now, it sounds like I've totally lost it, but I can show you the studies that people have made where you follow the money, and that's how the money flows.
Yes, well, our listeners here at Truth Frequency Radio are all over this. Nobody's jaw has dropped. This information is coming from multiple sources all over the world right now, and you're spot on, Karen, and very brave to bring this out. And we have 42 seconds till the break. How can people dive into your information in more depth? And then we will come back shortly and go further with this.
Go to my website, www.kahudes.net, and there you'll see all the letters that I've been writing to all the countries. This is Sienna with Illuminating the Shadowland on Truth Frequency Radio. I'm here with Karen Hudes. I'm ruining your last name, Karen. And let's just dive right into this second segment. Where do you want to take this? There's so much that you're involved in here. Well, let me say what happened today in the email that I sent to Germans. And I never know when I send an email to somebody how close that person is to the government or to other people in that country. But so we'll just call them the Germans, okay? What I said the week before was a question. I said, okay, I've gotten this email that if we don't watch out on the 1st of October, there are going to be 380,000 troops surrounding Washington, and all of the radio broadcasting is going to be turned off, and Barack Obama is poised to declare martial law. And I just put that out on before it's news, just the verbatim. It was an offer to provide me the documents, and I actually went back to that person after I blabbed about the email. I didn't say who sent it. But anyway, I said, do you want to send me the documents? I don't have them, but maybe what he sent was incorrect, but I tend to think it was correct. And so what I said to the Germans, and I also said this to the Russians, by the way, when I was fired 2 years after that, the board tried to rehire me, and one of the people that was trying to rehire me was the executive director from Russia. And the reason why is that they knew that I was just no nonsense and I didn't have my own agenda. I was just there to serve the board with rule of law. That was it. Because we needed that, or we were going to have a nuclear war. And these people didn't want a nuclear war either. And whatever I would say to one government, I would turn around and go back to Congress or somebody else in the U.S. government, and I would say, do you see what I just told these people? And it's not like I'm disclosing things. It's just the opposite. There's been a cover-up of corruption, which ought to be disclosed. So nobody can say I'm trying to put out information which is damaging to the United States. It's just the opposite. This is information which everybody in the United States is entitled to know. And I would rack my brain. I would try to figure out who is somebody I can go and tell this to, because the news wasn't taking my story. So I found a really good group called the National Taxpayers Union. And I would send all of the associations in all of the states updates until I started to get more access to the alternative media. But anyway, so let's go back to what I said to the Russians and the Germans. I said, do you really want to live in a world for another 600 years that is dominated by the Chinese and the Vatican? Because what's happened is this group of bankers, the Fed, I mean, that was your question to me, Sienna Leah, was about, the Rothschilds and the other groups that are owning the Fed. Those groups, they've lost it. They've lost it. And now it's the Chinese that are trying to grab what it was that the Fed had and sneak in. I mean, the Fed has bought up, the United States government bought up Congress and in something called state capture. And the Chinese are trying to worm their way in with all of those corrupt politicians quickly using martial law. And I've gone back to the Chinese and I've said, no, that's what you're trying, but it's not working because I've got a big mouth and I'm telling everybody, and you're not going to sneak in. If you want to try to, invade this country, people will be waiting for you and they'll know who you are, and they know that it's the Vatican and they know it's the Chinese. So don't give us this garbage about the Chinese being, benevolent people who have sat back for centuries. No, they're trying to grab power. And it's not happening. It's going to be rule of law. And what we have now, because of this very accurate stakeholder analysis and the fact that I'm getting enough limited exposure so that people understand what I'm telling them, what we have is we have a pushback for rule of law in the world, because we now have a choice. If there's going to be a confrontation in this power shift, because up until now, every time you've had one of these big power shifts, it's been through a world war. And we're trying to use Jacek Kugler's model to smooth the transition. Yes, the East can have their day, but it's not going to be now. It's going to be in a gradual, smooth transition, because people can look at Jacek Kugler's model, and it's on my website. They can read it. And I've gone to the Department of Defense, and I've said, you know this model as well as I do. Where are you on this? Do you want to lose Germany out of NATO? You didn't give them back their gold when they asked for it in January. That's an act of war. Germany's going to go off and combine with Russia. That's what the model's predicting. That's what we're seeing now. That's what happened when Germany said they wouldn't share intelligence information anymore. So this model is right on target. And that's how I knew, from the little pieces of information that I got, what the Chinese were up to. And because of this gold backwardation, that's how I knew that the Fed is now on the skids. Their time is up. And the world is now going to be shifting to a different kind of currency. I'm not saying that the dollar isn't going to be there. What I'm saying is that the dollar is going to be backed by gold. And where is this gold coming from? It's coming from bunkers that are in the Philippines and also in Indonesia and Thailand and Malaysia, some other places, but mostly in the Philippines. And what the email that I got from the Germans is to tell me who's the authorized signatory on bringing this gold out. And so what I said to the Germans was, I said, I'm not getting enough traction. I can't be, people aren't believing me. We have to get all of this information. And I have some other information, which, I'm not going to give you all overload on. I can tell you that when I got that information and started understanding what I was being told, I spent a whole day that I couldn't, I was driving, I would miss the exit. It was so overwhelming. And so what I asked the Germans, I said, would you do me a favor? Would you spend some money, buy one of these big, we've got these PR firms on K Street. I said, do me a favor. Would you buy these firms and we can get some of this information out that way? Don't leave it all up to me, with the alternative media. We're not going to, we've got to get our act together by October 1st. So that's where things are. The gold is coming out. Is it going to be grabbed by the Chinese who are trying to grab it? Or is it going to come out where the whole world knows? And the authorized signatories are the ones that are going to say how it gets spent. And what I'm pushing for is that we use the existing machinery that we have, the existing institutions, but we add something to it. What we add to it is we add the ability to hear from whistleblowers, because when the Congress appropriated its capital increase for the World Bank, they put a special language in there. They said you don't get a penny until the effects of retaliation against the World Bank whistleblower are eliminated. So that meant that I should have been reinstated, because after, remember I brought this lawsuit. I bought a World Bank bond. It was settled by 188 ministers of finance. But when I went to go back into the World Bank, the security firm, which is part and parcel of this super entity that's controlled by the Fed, wouldn't give me a badge, a security badge. So then during the spring meetings in April, that's when the ministers of finance gave me a security badge. So I went to, it was a series of 3 meetings starting April 19th. I went in and, I was talking to the Chinese, I was talking to the French, I was having a great time. I went back the next day and the Secret Service wouldn't let me in. I said, that's interesting. Since when do you prevent me from coming into a meeting where I've been giving a security badge? So then they got a flunky inside the World Bank to sign a barring notice, and then Eric Holder sued me for trespass. I shouldn't laugh. It's been wild. So I went to all the sheriffs. I've gone to all the governors. I've gone to all the attorneys general. I've gone to all the chief justices of the state Supreme Courts, and I've regaled them with all of the legality and the illegality. And the most important thing now is when I got my testimony up in the UK Parliament, one of the UK lawyers came to me. He said, Karen, you need to start telling the credit rating agencies. So I did. I gave them a front row seat, and I kept saying, the United States is going to lose its credit rating. And it did. We got downgraded by Standard & Poor's. So then Eric Holder started suing Standard & Poor's. So you know what I heard a couple of weeks ago? No. The emerging countries are starting their own credit rating agency. So the writing is on the wall for the United States. We are surrounded. The chessboard is really clearly there. And what are we doing? We're running off, distracting people, dropping bombs. You're not supposed to drop bombs unless the Security Council has given you a green light. Where are all our allies? They're not telling us they're with us. Since when are we the world's policemen? Americans don't believe in hegemony. They don't back this. So this is just absolute desperation on the part of the groups that think that they've got the right to run this country, despite what all the people in the country think. And they're deliberately trying to misinform the people with this mainstream media. One of the things that I saw the last couple of days is I think it's called the Verona Treaty, where it was actually written the contempt that the people who think they can run the world in the Vatican have for the citizens on this planet. The idea is to keep them misinformed and to just with absolute contempt decide what it is that they think they should be deciding. That's, that whole system. We've seen that. The Vatican is fired, actually. I was saying in the last broadcast that the Fed was fired. I think what's really fired is the Vatican.
Well, you are certainly the poster woman for humanity. Get up off your knees. Look at what one woman can do who take no for an answer and thinks she can do something. And this is what they don't want us to know, that each one of us, look at the world of confrontation and taking things up, that one woman who believes she can do it can get in there. We feel so disempowered by the mega control and the massive domination, the gridlock that we've been in for so long. So I just you and I'm inspired by you, and I'm wonderful to get you on the air, if for no other reason than look at what one woman. Maybe you're crazy, Karen. I don't know, but you're just crazy enough to create a lot of ripples in some very high places.
Okay, I was going to answer. We were talking about personal background. Why is it that I'm doing these things?
Yes.
Believe me, I didn't start out with the idea that I was going to be doing them. But one of the things in my background is I was captain of the NYU fencing team. I had a Hungarian fencing coach, and he drilled into me that when you are under attack, and somebody's making a lot of noise, and nobody makes more noise than a Hungarian fencing coach, it puts you in a kind of a zone where you actually welcome that, because when you're a fencer, if somebody's on the attack, that's when you score your points. You're much stronger on what they call the parry riposte, the defense, because if somebody's attacking, they're off balance, they're on the wrong foot, and verbally, they're going to be contradicting themselves. And so that was, I was trained that way. So in a way, and the other thing is, if you've gotten that background in training, you welcome the opponent, because you're never a faster fencer than the last opponent you've fenced. And so for the last, if people are wondering whether it's possible for somebody to be in the situation I'm in, just look at one of the documents in my lawsuit, which is a chronology. You see where the thing started, and you see how with each, it was I sort of felt like I was going up in an elevator, and I would be at a certain level, and I would think, well, this would be it. It would resolve. And then it turned out that, like an onion, there are different layers. And so when I was dealing with the Fed, I thought, well, this must be it. And then all of a sudden, no, there's another layer. There's the Jesuits and the Vatican. Am I going to give up after all these years because there are Jesuits in the Vatican? You better believe I'm not. Those guys had better get their act together and pack their bags and get out of everybody's way. We don't want them there anymore. They've had enough, and we've had enough.
Well, this is the thing, that we have so much more power than most of us are even willing to entertain. And you know this, and you're willing to. This is, I just think it's fantastic to have you on the show tonight, really as a role model for us, to shake us out of our complacency, that we can have impact. And we don't know what impact, we don't know the end of the story. But if we all get out there with that kind of drive, you better believe that it's going to create some waves and create some change.
If people want to know what is it that they can do, the first thing they need to do is they need to start talking to their neighbors. And I wouldn't call it a study group necessarily, but you can't figure all this stuff out on your own. You really need to be interacting with other people. So, for example, Sienna Leah was talking to me about how I'm working with some of the other whistleblowers, because no one person from one perspective is going to see everything. It's like a big jigsaw puzzle. And so so if you're going to be talking to your neighbors, you can see what it is that they've seen, and you can share information, and you can test your hypotheses. That's how it is that I'm working. I'm working with all the other whistleblowers. I would be sitting at my desk, and somebody would say, "Hey, Karen, there's a congressional hearing," and I would jump in my car. I live right outside of Washington. I'd jump in my car, and I'd be at the hearing. One day, it was really fun, because Elaine had gotten through to the House of Lords. And the House of Lords had said, we're not going to just keep on giving money to the World Bank. That's good money down a rat hole. And the UK donates grants more than any other country to the World Bank. So that was a pretty big piece of news. And I went down to a hearing where Secretary Geithner was there. And I went up to his, I said, where's his driver? And I found his driver. And, I gave his driver a piece of paper that let him know what was going on in the House of Lords. Fantastic. A little message from Elaine.
This is so fun. This is such a female way of approaching the situation, too. It's so outrageously fantastic. We are about to launch a multiversity called Rise. I would love to get you as one of our guest staff because we will be using the Fuse Box for the interactive video with hundreds of people, where we can bring people from all around the world and put our heads together and develop strategies and what can we do and who is holding pieces of this knowledge and connecting. That's a hugely powerful strategy, in my opinion.
That would be really fun. It
would be fun, yes. And we might as well make this fun because it's been gruesome for a very, very long time. So we have to get you back for another hour. We have 7 minutes left. So you do not believe that this house of cards is about to fall. We're going into global collapse, apocalypse, nuclear war, World War III. It certainly looks that way at the moment, Karen. What makes you feel otherwise?
Just think about it. I have been nagging 188 ministers of finance to do their job and prevent us from landing there. And I've been doing the same thing with all of the governors, the 50 governors and the 10 governors that are on this special council that are supposed to be dealing with the homeland security. Do we want martial law? No. What has to happen? It's really quite simple. We've got all this gold buried in the Philippines. We need to get the gold out. We need to, all of us, 188 countries, sit around the table and figure out how we're going to manage things so that we don't end up in permanent gold backwardation. We were able to do that in 1944 for the Bretton Woods conference. We can do that again. That's not that hard. We can do that instead of distracting everybody with sarin gas in Syria. We don't need to be doing that. We need to be talking about what to do about the gold. It's coming out, and we have to do it right. It's not up to the Chinese where that gold goes. I'm sorry. It's not. It's the world's gold. And they know that very well, and they better not be grabby.
Well, you tell them, Karen.
That's right.
You are. Fantastic. That's incredible. Yeah, and I know this is part of the Dragon family and the Neil Keenan thing and the whole, there's supposed to be gold in all sorts of places, not just in the Philippines, all over Indonesia.
That's right. But it's not, I'm sorry, it's not Dragon family gold. And they know that full well. It's gold that came from all over the place. It came from the death camps in Europe. It was put there by the Vatican. So, don't give me this garbage that it's Chinese gold and they have a right to it. That is not true, and they know it. They better behave themselves. We don't want 600 more years of Vatican. We've had enough of that.
So it's time for the world institutions to get together and cooperate. Well, they're going to need quite a few facilitators, and I always felt that women would be brilliant at that, women who are balanced and clear and dedicated, to get them to communicate with one another. I can't imagine what those meetings must be like currently with the competitive, cold-blooded edge that people walk around with and all of the satanic energies and the perversions and the horror that they've been living in for so long. It'd be a huge shift of energy to get them to cooperate and do something for the people of this world, Karen.
Well, I think the most important thing is not whether it's men or women. It's got to be that it's not somebody behind closed doors. And the one way to find out what's going on is to let whistleblowers have their say without being punished. So the number one thing that has to happen is whistleblowers have got to be protected. And we already know who some of the whistleblowers are who are being punished. I think the very first thing is to undo some of these very draconian sentences against them, and make sure that information is being spread. So if the mainstream media is dominated by the Fed, ignore it. Don't buy the papers. Just spend your time on the internet.
Exactly. Very, very well stated. Yes. So you believe that people are having a greater impact than they realize even now, I would imagine. There have to be multi-millions of people who are becoming very aware to this information. But right. The thing is that in many cases, they just don't know what to do about it. They don't know the steps to take, as you do know the steps that you want to take. So this is where education, I think, is going to come in the near future.
Education is vital. But the most important thing is that people shouldn't feel depressed or, locked out. They're not.
We're much more powerful than we believe. And it's our time now. The whole energy on the planet is shifting, but we need to know it, and we need to find solution-based strategies to step into it and not be afraid. I mean, look at who you're up against. Most people would think, your life is on the line in every minute. And how do you have the courage to step up against these draconian forces? We know that they're cold-blooded killers and psychopaths and archonic madmen. And here you are talking sense to them.
Well, you know that the old joke about the optimist falling out of a 10-story building, and on every floor they shouted, "All right, so far."
Oh, fantastic. Well, we're just about out of time for this hour. I have to get you back for a second hour. There's so much more to go into. And so how do people find, again, your information, what you're doing, videos that you put out recently, and a way to support you?
Go to my website, or you can find me on Twitter, Karen Hudes at twitter.com.
That's
and
Hudes.
Facebook. Right.
Yeah. How can we support you? Getting the word out, spreading it through our networks. What else?
Go to your executives in your counties, because I've mobilized them. Go to your sheriffs. Tell them about me and tell them about what you want and what you expect them to do. I've gotten in touch with every single layer of government in the United States and told them that we don't want this corruption anymore, and that I'm getting through to all the people. So you have to make that clear, that I have gotten through, and that we're all in this together.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Really take this to heart. Go out there and let your voice be heard. Shine your light and have your impact. Well, it is time. We are totally right on the edge, right up against it. It's time for all of us to move up a little bit out of our comfort zones. And remember, have some fun doing it. Good night, everyone. This is Sienna Leah at Illuminating the Shadowland on Truth Frequency Radio Network.